I'm Lisa Botter from The Deal, and here with me is Morrow Sodali, CEO, Australia, Maria Leftakis.
Hi Lisa, how are you?
Good. Maria, could you start with an overview of activism in Australia at the moment?
So activism in Australia, I would say, is different to the way you see it play out in the US in particular. We have a market which is quite resistant to a very hostile or aggressive approach. And so what we tend to find is most effective is active or activist investors who are really constructively engaging with boards, management and shareholders to try and achieve the outcomes they're looking to achieve, as opposed to going down the proxy fight path and the very high profile aggressive path.
And what laws make Australia open to activism?
Well, it's quite straightforward to requisition a shareholder meeting. All you need is to either own 5% of a company's stock or have 100 shareholders requisition a meeting. And once you do that, if the requisition notice is valid, within 60 days the company has to call the meeting, and then the meeting is held. In fact, shareholders can also run their own meeting under our Corporations Act, and so that makes it quite friendly. And they're able to, I think the other important thing is the ability to receive the register of members and to also get information on the beneficial ownership of institutional shareholders is something that's possible and relatively straightforward. So you have the means in terms of calling the meeting and access to the data to then enable you to engage.
But activists do need a bit more finesse around it. Could you explain how the methods that are used to court investors and the corporations?
I think that's a very good point. We have quite a close-knit business community, and our directors and management and institutional shareholders are actually quite the word could be integrated, but in the sense that everyone knows the other person, they're actively involved in a lot of the larger companies. And so to be seeking to try and push a dissident slate on a company is very difficult to do unless you're able to articulate the reasons why institutional shareholders should support you. So even if the rationale has merit, it's not whether or not there's an issue that needs to be solved. It's, are you best placed as the dissident to do that? What are your plans? Can you demonstrate that they will help to deliver shareholder value without destabilising the company? Do you have the right slate to enable that to be achieved? So what's your record? And also building that trust with investors, because if you're an unknown quantity, then they're not really likely to place their trust to you or give you their vote.
Yet, one of the best known activists in the US, Elliott, did a campaign against BHP, which is one of Australia's biggest companies. And it did happen to be successful. So what methods did they use to get it over the line?
That's a fantastic example, and I know Elliott has conducted a lot of campaigns globally and continues to be one of the most active activists. When you look at how they approach the BHP situation, what is noteworthy is that they didn't actually requisition a meeting, they didn't send out fight letters, they didn't try and besmirch BHP's reputation through the media machine. What they did is very comprehensively engage with the board, with institutional shareholders most importantly, and really try to inform themselves about how they could get the support, I suppose, to enable them to achieve the 3 pillars under their value unlock plan. And they were successful. When you look at those 3 pillars, 2 of those 3 you can tick off, right? Without having gone through the process of quite a high profile and aggressive proxy fight. So I think that's noteworthy. However, they did stir some anxiety on the board. BHP's got a logo or a mantra which is Think Big, and it was quite cheeky of Elliott. They took out these massive billboards and their logo was Think Smart, so that did create a bit of stir. But it just goes to show that, and although there was a lot of resistance, because BHP does have a very large component of its investors being retail or smaller investors who are very loyal to the board, It enabled there to be a dialogue, I think even unlocking a dialogue between long-standing institutional shareholders in BHP with the board to express their views. And so I think Elliott has demonstrated how you can actually work through some of your initiatives and achieve success, which by the way, they didn't have to, again, requisition the meeting. It was a decision made by the board.
And do you think that specific campaign opened up bigger Australian companies to activism?
Well, I think it demonstrates that you can be successful. We have the right regulatory environment, we have the right capital market environment, we have very rich foreign institutional shareholder ownership in Australia with quite specific guidelines about how they analyse and assess shareholder proposals. And if you look at some of the success we've had, there's a lot of social activism in Australia at the moment. And even up to recently, some of those proposals have received support in the 40s. It clearly demonstrates that there is appetite and receptivity to shareholder proposals where institutional shareholders believe it's a worthwhile cause or it will unlock value. So I think that the conditions are ripe and right.
And one of the biggest changes has been the two-strike law, which came into effect in 2011. Can you speak through how the activists are using that specific law to gain access to the companies?
It's a very good question. It's actually probably being used a lot more by domestic funds.
Okay.
The way the two strikes law works is that if shareholders, or if 25% of the votes are voted against the compensation plan, then it is required for the company or the issuer to put the entire board up for a spill. It's a spill motion the following year. Now, these spill motions are very rarely, I think there were only 2 cases of them ever being supported, but what it's done, and most institutional shareholders don't want to see that type of destabilisation at board level, but they want to send a strong signal to the board that they're unhappy with compensation. Now, how activists have used that is as an easy path or tool with a hard stick to try and get a strike to then bring the board to the negotiating table to enable them to, again, achieve some of their objectives, be that, you know, increasing dividends or share buybacks, etc.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Lisa.